Alright, today we're going to go over the miter saw. This is a power miter saw. You guys have used the the hand miter box when we did our other material earlier on with the hand saw. This one's power, so obviously it's going to have electric to it. So the first thing that I want to do when I walk up here, I want to make sure that my guard is working properly and that it's moving up and down as I raise and lower the head of this saw. The second thing I want to check while it's not running or plugged in, while it's not plugged in, I want to check my switch. Sometimes there'll be sawdust gets into that switch and it could possibly get stuck on. And then you go to plug it in and it's running when you plug it in. Okay, so the guard, first thing, the switch, the second thing, and then with every electric tool that we use, I want you to get in the habit when you plug it in, don't reach down and grab the plug and plug it in. I want you to grab it at as close as you can to the motor, and I want you to slide that through your finger just like that. When I slide that through my finger like that, I feel anything on there, I'm going to look at it and see if the coating on the outside of this wire is bared. If you plug that in and there's a bare wire in there, if there's some moisture when we're working outside or some water on the floor in here, you'll get electrocuted from it. So get in the habit of grabbing that cord at the back, running it through your hand. And if you feel anything, take a look at it, see if it's bulged, or see if you're not sure whether it's good or bad, check with me and we'll investigate and see if it's any good. Once I've got that done, then I'm gonna plug it in and I'm ready to go. Those are my three things. So the guard, the switch, check the cord. My saw's ready to go. Then now I'm gonna prepare my piece of material that I'm about to cut. Just like we did before, you guys are gonna cut about 2 inches off of here just to get a feel for running the saw. Put your mark on, use your speed square so you know where you're cutting. As you notice, I put this table up here so that I could work off of here. What I see sometimes students doing, they'll put their material up here, they'll measure on the saw, and you're underneath the saw with the tape measure and all of that. It's not a good habit to get into to do your work on the saw. So do your work off to the side on a pre-made bench. That's what your saw horses are going to be for. Get it ready. Okay, so when I get ready to put this material up here, if my piece is too long, you can see I've got these supports on the end. They slide out. If I'm cutting a long piece, I can slide it all the way out, whatever it takes to support that end. In the event that you've got a board that's 20 foot long and your support doesn't come out that far, you can recruit a helper to hold this in for you. Okay? Now that I'm ready to cut, I've checked my guard, my switch, and my cord. I've got my mark on my board. There are 2 marks on the bed of this saw. As you can see, it says not to put your hands within that. On my test that you guys will be taking, it's 6 inches on there, and this is a little bit more than 6 inches, but 6 inches is you can't be within 6 inches of that blade. But once you get that set, you're going to hold on to your material and the fence. Okay? You're going to bring down the saw, line it up with the line, bring the saw back to the top, and start the saw up. Once you start the saw up, you're going to come down through, cut the piece, let off the trigger, and let it stop before you raise it. Okay? So just like this. Let that blade stop before you raise it. We'll have a inclination to want to grab that piece. Don't reach under that blade. Don't get in the habit of doing that. Use your material and push it out of the way. Then you can move over, line up, and set for your next cut. So, to recap again, don't put your hands on the inside of these guard lines here. All 3 of our miter boxes have the same lines on them. Don't go inside of those lines. Remember, that's a 6 inch mark. Stay within outside of that 6 inches on the saw blade, and that's the straight cut. When you start cutting the miters that we did, to change the gauge on here, you push the button on the bottom and you lock it down by pushing down on the handle. All 3 of them are very similar on that, but some of them will cut farther. This one cuts 50 degrees both ways, and that only cuts 50 degrees one way. So to release it, lift up on the handle, squeeze the button on the bottom, and it's got presets on here. We're making 45s and 22.5s, so we'll get into those angles at a different time. The other thing that you have to pay attention to when you're cutting on an angle, when you turn this and you're cutting this, I just moved that blade closer to my hand. So you want to pay attention to how you line this up. If your hand is too close, what I want you to do is I want you to grab a clamp and clamp your material, get it lined up on your line, and clamp the material to the fence with a squeeze clamp or some kind of clamp so that you can use it without putting your hand on the material. You have to have whether you use the clamp or whether you use your hand, you have to have the material secured to the fence and to the bed. If there's a gap between there on either one of those and you go to use the saw, it'll smack it against there, it'll pinch yourself, and you're going to put yourself in danger. Okay? One of the last things I want to talk to you about is that scrap piece that I cut off already. There'll be times when you have small pieces of scrap, and they'll go down into the groove right there on that bed. If that happens and you've got a piece wedged in there, you want to unplug it, move your stuff out of the way, make sure it's unplugged, and then use a pencil or a stick to get that material out of there. In the event that it's wedged down in there too bad that you can't get it out, come and get me and we'll work on it together, and I'll show you what to do in that event. What questions do you have?
Are we going to be allowed to use this?
Good question. The question was, are you going to be allowed to use this? So everyone's going to use it today with me. I'm going to be right beside you. I'm going to walk each one of you individually through it. After that, we're going to do a safety test on it tomorrow. So you'll get time to study for it tomorrow. I'll give you the test, and then everybody will have to pass that test to be able to use this saw.
All right, man. Which one is good if the button gets stuck on?
If the button gets stuck on in the event that there's sawdust and stuff in there, that's a little maintenance thing. If you see that it's got sawdust all over it and it generates a lot of sawdust, so we'll unplug it, or at that time, if it's stuck on, we'll know it, and then we'll use the air hose and blow it out. If that doesn't work, we'll use a shop vac and suck it out with the shop vac. Good question, though. It's always important to keep, so this sawdust will build up on here quickly. It's a good idea to check this bag, this dust bag, before you start. If it's full, empty it, and if there's a lot of sawdust on the bed, you want to blow it off and get it cleaned off before you start. All that stuff in your way just makes it unsafe for you. Good question. What other questions do you have?